Ex-wife confronted the ex-husband at the gala staircase until a sealed ledger shattered his position. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main characters. Emily Taylor stood at the top of the grand staircase, her gaze fixed on Daniel Taylor, who was laughing with a group of well-dressed guests. The glittering lights of the gala hall below reflected off the crystal chandeliers, but all Emily could focus on was him. Daniel, her ex-husband, was effortlessly charming everyone around him. It had been years since their divorce, yet the anger she felt was as raw as the day she'd walked out on their marriage. She had never truly forgiven him for what had happened between them, and tonight, at this gala, she had come prepared. She had no intention of letting him get away with it anymore. As she descended the staircase, each step seemed to echo in the silence, her heels clicking sharply on the polished marble floor. The guests parted for her, but their curious glances did not faze her. All her attention was on Daniel. When he finally noticed her, the smile on his face faltered for just a moment, before he quickly recovered, masking his surprise with a forced grin. He hadn't expected to see her here, much less this close. Emily reached the bottom of the stairs, standing just a few feet away from him. The tension between them was palpable. Their eyes locked, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. "Emily," Daniel said, his voice betraying just a hint of unease. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer him right away, but instead, she took a step closer. "I think it's time we had a conversation," she said coldly, her voice steady but carrying a weight of finality. Daniel's smile dropped. The room seemed to grow quieter as the realization of what was about to unfold began to sink in. Emily knew she had him cornered. She wasn't here for a petty argument. No, she was here to finally finish what they had started years ago. She had something Daniel didn't expect, something that could bring down everything he had worked so hard to build. A sealed ledger, hidden away for years, containing secrets Daniel had thought were buried forever. As she reached into her bag, the eyes of the gala's elite followed her every move. Daniel's expression shifted, his confidence faltering for the first time since she'd walked in. She pulled the ledger out, the leather cover worn with age but still intact. She looked at him one last time, then held it out. "This," she said, her voice low but clear, "is the end of your perfect little world." Daniel's face paled as he took a step back. The ledger, this forgotten piece of their past, was about to shatter everything he had. Emily had no intention of waiting any longer for her revenge. She was done. Tonight it all came out. The room fell into an eerie silence as Emily held the ledger out in front of Daniel. His once confident posture began to falter, his eyes darting nervously from the ledger to her face. The people around them seemed to vanish, as though the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. "What is this, Emily?" Daniel asked, his voice shaky, though he tried to mask it with bravado. Emily didn't respond immediately, letting the weight of the moment sink in. She could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the first crack in the impenetrable facade he had built over the years. The truth was finally catching up with him. She could almost feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable, as the guests at the gala shifted uncomfortably, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. Emily's grip tightened around the leather-bound ledger, her fingers brushing over the worn surface. The years of silence and restraint had led to this moment, the moment she would finally expose him for everything he had hidden. She took a deep breath, her voice low but resolute as she spoke. "You thought you could keep it all buried, Daniel. You thought you could hide behind your perfect life, your charming smile, and your little secrets." Daniel's face paled, his hands instinctively clenching at his sides. "Emily, please," he pleaded, his voice desperate now. "Whatever this is, we can work it out. We can talk about this. You don't have to do this here, not now." But Emily wasn't listening. Her mind had been made up long ago. She had spent years haunted by the lies he had told her, the promises he had broken, and the way he had always manipulated every situation to his advantage. She wasn't going to let him slip away again. No, she said firmly, her eyes never leaving his. You don't get to control this anymore. The truth is coming out, whether you like it or not. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. His pulse quickened as he realized there was no going back. He had underestimated Emily, thinking she would never have the courage to confront him like this, in front of so many people. But here she was, poised and unyielding. Emily slowly opened the ledger, revealing the yellowed pages inside. As she began to flip through it, the room seemed to hold its breath. Each page turned was like a countdown, building to something inevitable. The entries inside were more than just words. They were the evidence of his deceit, the proof of the lies that had been carefully concealed for so long. Daniel's expression shifted from panic to frustration. Emily, stop. He pleaded again, but his voice was weaker now, lacking the strength it had once had. Emily didn't stop. She let the words on the pages speak for themselves, knowing that once they were out, there was no taking them back. She stopped at a particular entry, one that seemed to seal Daniel's fate. She looked up at him, her gaze unwavering. This is where it all falls apart, Daniel, she said softly, her voice carrying an undeniable finality. His face drained of color as he saw the words she had pointed to. His heart raced, and for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt the weight of his past catching up with him. It wasn't just a matter of his reputation or his position, it was his entire life, the empire he had built on lies, now crumbling in front of him. Emily could see the panic rising in his eyes, and for a moment she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then she remembered all the years of heartache, all the trust he had broken, and she knew she wasn't going to let him off the hook. This ends tonight, she said, her voice steady and full of resolve. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was trapped. There was no more pretending, no more evading. The truth had been laid bare, and the consequences were inevitable. Emily took one final look at him, then turned to face the room full of guests. The once lively atmosphere of the gala had shifted, and now all eyes were on them. This moment would be remembered, and Daniel's carefully constructed world would never be the same. The tension in the room was almost unbearable as Emily stood at the center of the grand gala hall, the sealed ledger still in her hands. The guests, who had been mingling and enjoying the evening just moments before, now watched in stunned silence. Daniel stood motionless, his face a mixture of disbelief and growing desperation. He had always been in control, always the one with the upper hand. But now, here he was, facing the very thing he had tried so hard to keep hidden. Emily's gaze remained fixed on him, her expression unreadable. She could see the cracks in his armor, the facade he had so carefully constructed over the years, slowly crumbling. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he struggled to regain his composure, but the reality of the situation was sinking in. Emily was not backing down. This was the moment he had feared, the moment that everything he had worked for was at risk of unraveling. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Daniel spoke. Emily, you don't have to do this. Please, we can talk about it. We don't need to make a scene. His voice was barely above a whisper, but the desperation in it was clear. Emily didn't flinch. A scene? She repeated, her voice cold but steady. This is the reality, Daniel. Your reality. And it's falling apart. She looked down at the ledger in her hands, running her fingers over the pages. She had waited so long for this. The truth had been buried for far too long, and now it was coming to light, whether he liked it or not. As Emily began to speak again, her voice was clear and unwavering. You lied to me. You lied to everyone. You thought you could get away with it. But this ledger. She paused, holding it up for all to see. This is the proof of everything you've done. Everything you've hidden. Daniel's face strained of color as he took a step back, his mind racing. He had no idea how she had gotten hold of the ledger, but the fact that she had it now meant that his carefully constructed life was about to come crashing down. He had worked so hard to keep this secret, to bury it deep enough that no one would ever find it. But Emily had found it, and now he was facing the consequences. "Emily, please," Daniel pleaded again, his voice shaking. "You don't have to destroy me like this. I can explain everything. Just give me a chance." Emily's eyes narrowed as she took a step forward, her resolve stronger than ever. "It's too late for explanations, Daniel. The truth is out now. There's no turning back." The silence in the room grew heavier as the weight of her words sank in. The guests who had gathered around them were no longer whispering. They were watching, waiting for the next move. Emily could feel their eyes on her, but she didn't care. This was her moment. The moment when she would finally take back control. She turned her attention back to Daniel, whose face was now twisted with fear and regret. "You thought you could control everything. You thought you could keep everyone in the dark. But I'm done being the victim. I'm done living in your shadow." Her voice was firm, each word carrying the weight of years of pent-up anger and frustration. "Tonight it all ends. Your lies, your manipulation, your hold over me. It ends here." Daniel remained silent, his face a mask of defeat. He had no more words, no more excuses. Emily had taken everything from him in that one moment, and he knew it. The truth had won. Emily looked around at the stunned faces of the guests, her heart racing but her confidence unwavering. She had come here tonight to confront her past, and she had done it. She had exposed him for who he truly was. And now, there was nothing left to hide. Emily's heart raced as the room remained eerily silent. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, the guests watching in anticipation of what would happen next. Daniel stood before her, visibly broken, the man who had once been so sure of himself now crumbling under the pressure of the truth. It was a moment she had been waiting for, a moment when everything he had built came crashing down. She glanced down at the ledger one last time, letting the reality of what she had just done sink in. The truth was out, and there was no going back. For years she had lived in the shadows of his lies, but tonight she was free. Free from the guilt, the heartbreak, and the resentment that had weighed on her for so long. Daniel had taken so much from her, and now, she was taking it all back. As the silence stretched on, Emily took a deep breath, her body still trembling with adrenaline. She could see Daniel's face, pale and filled with regret, but there was no sympathy in her heart. Not anymore. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with the consequences. "You've lost everything," Emily said, her voice steady, her eyes never leaving his. Daniel didn't reply. He couldn't. His lips trembled, but no words escaped. Emily knew he was processing everything she had just exposed. The facade he had so carefully built for years, the lies he had fed to everyone around him, all of it was falling apart. "You think you can fix this? You can't," Emily continued, her voice cutting through the heavy air. "You've been lying to everyone, pretending to be something you're not. But it ends here." Daniel's eyes flickered with a mixture of anger and desperation. He reached out as if to grab her, but Emily stepped back, holding the ledger up as if it were a shield. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. The power had shifted, and she was in control now. For the first time, she could see it in his eyes, he was the one who was scared. "What do you want from me?" Daniel finally spoke, his voice hoarse and filled with fear. "I want you to face the truth," Emily replied, her tone unwavering. "I want you to understand the damage you've done. Not just to me, but to everyone you've lied to. This is your reckoning, Daniel." He flinched at her words, the weight of her accusation hitting him like a physical blow. For the first time, he saw her not as the woman he had controlled, not as the one he had betrayed, but as someone who had found her own power. And in that realization, he understood the depth of his failure. "I'm sorry," Daniel muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I've messed up, but please, don't destroy me like this." Emily's gaze hardened. You destroyed yourself a long time ago, Daniel. You just didn't realize it until now. The guests, who had been silently observing the scene unfold before them, began to murmur among themselves. Some exchanged glances, others looked at Daniel with pity, but no one spoke. Emily had made sure the truth was out, and no one could deny it anymore. Daniel's shoulders slumped in defeat, and Emily could see that the fight had left him. He was broken, just as she had once been. But this time, there would be no sympathy, no chance for redemption. She had waited too long for this moment. It was her turn now. It's over, Daniel, Emily said, her voice firm. There's nothing left for you to hide behind. As she turned to walk away, leaving him standing there in the shattered remnants of his once perfect life, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation. She had faced the man who had haunted her for years, and now, she was free. Free from the lies, free from the pain, and most of all, free from him. As Emily walked away from the scene, she could feel a sense of power she had never known before. The world around her, once shadowed by Daniel's lies, now seemed brighter, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't sure exactly what she had expected to feel after exposing the truth, but this freedom, this lightness, was more than she had imagined. She had been living under the weight of Daniel's manipulations for years, but tonight, that burden was gone. As she made her way toward the exit of the gala, she heard the soft whispers of the guests behind her, but none of it mattered anymore. She had done what she came to do. Daniel had finally been exposed, and nothing could change that. The cool night air greeted her as she stepped outside, the soft hum of the city filling the silence that had settled. In her mind, Emily paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, letting the cool breeze wash over her. It felt like a new beginning. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had control over her own life. As she turned to leave the gala behind, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting to see a message from her close friends, maybe offering their support. Instead, it was a call from an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" Emily said, her voice steady but still carrying the remnants of the adrenaline that had coursed through her during the confrontation. "Emily?" The voice on the other end was familiar, though she couldn't place it at first. "It's Michael. I saw everything. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Michael. Her old friend from years ago, someone she hadn't spoken to in ages. They had been close back before everything had fallen apart with Daniel, but she hadn't heard from him since the divorce. "I'm fine," Emily replied, her voice softening. "I just needed to do this. It's been a long time coming." Michael was silent for a moment before speaking again. "I know it's been hard for you, Emily. And I know tonight wasn't easy, but I'm proud of you. You stood up for yourself." Emily smiled, though it was a bittersweet smile. "Thank you, Michael. I think I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." She could hear the warmth in his voice as he spoke. "You deserve to be happy, Emily. And you deserve to be free." Those words, simple but heartfelt, hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so much time feeling trapped in her past, and the life Daniel had tried to force upon her, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to truly be free. She had let go of the man who had controlled her life, and now, for the first time in a long time, she could breathe. "I'll be okay," she said softly. "I just need time to figure things out." Michael was quiet for a moment, and then he spoke again, his voice filled with understanding. "Take all the time you need, Emily. I'm here for you." Emily's heart felt lighter with his words, knowing that she wasn't alone. The future was uncertain, but at least now, she was ready to face it on her own terms. With one last deep breath, she hung up the phone, tucking it back into her pocket. As she walked away from the gala, the city lights flickering in the distance, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced her past, and now, she was ready to move forward. Whatever came next, she knew she had the strength to handle it. Emily sat in her car, staring out at the city lights reflecting in the rearview mirror. The confrontation at the gala had been everything she needed it to be: cathartic, powerful, and liberating. But now, in the stillness of her car, the adrenaline was slowly fading, replaced by an emptiness she hadn't expected. She wasn't sure what came next. The past few years had been defined by Daniel's presence, his control over her life, his lies. But now that he was out of the picture, she felt a strange void. What did she do now? Where did she go from here? She reached for her phone, instinctively checking for any new messages. A few texts from friends asking how she was doing, but nothing that really mattered. Her finger hovered over Michael's number, but she hesitated before putting the phone down again. She wasn't sure if she was ready to talk about what had just happened. She needed time to process. Taking a deep breath, Emily started the car and began to drive, not toward any specific destination, but just away from everything. The quiet hum of the engine was oddly comforting, giving her space to think. She drove for what felt like hours, but in reality, it had only been a short time. She found herself at a park near the edge of the city, a place she used to visit when she was younger, before everything had become so complicated. The park was nearly empty, save for a few people walking their dogs or sitting on benches, lost in their own thoughts. Emily parked the car and got out, her shoes tapping against the concrete as she walked to a bench by the lake. The air was cool, and the soft rustling of the leaves in the trees was calming. She sat down and closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds around her. It was peaceful here, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of clarity. She had spent so long in the chaos of her relationship with Daniel that she had forgotten what peace felt like. But now, in this moment of quiet, she realized how much she had been missing. Emily let out a slow breath, feeling the weight on her chest begin to lift. She had faced Daniel tonight, and she had won. The truth had been revealed, and she had taken back her life. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was in control of her own destiny. She wasn't defined by her past anymore. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was hers to shape. As she sat there by the lake, Emily smiled to herself, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had walked away from the man who had held her back for so long, and now, she was free. For the first time, she could truly breathe, knowing that the only person who could control her future was herself. As Emily sat by the lake, the soft sound of the water lapping against the shore was soothing, grounding her in the present moment. The chaos of the gala, the confrontation with Daniel, and all the emotions she had experienced felt like a distant memory, fading with each passing second. She was starting to realize that she had more power than she had ever believed. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance anymore, she was in control of her life. It had taken so long to get to this point, so many years of fear, doubt, and regret, but now, as she looked out over the water, she could feel the weight lifting. The truth had been exposed, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel burdened by the lies and the deception that had once defined her existence. Emily took a deep breath, her mind now clear, the adrenaline from the confrontation wearing off. She wasn't sure what was next, but she knew it would be on her terms. She wasn't going to let the past define her any longer. The future was wide open, full of possibilities she hadn't even considered before. She thought about Daniel for a moment, but only briefly. The man who had once held so much power over her was now irrelevant. She had faced him, confronted him, and walked away stronger. The future no longer seemed like an obstacle to be feared. It felt like a canvas, waiting for her to create her own masterpiece. Emily pulled out her phone and glanced at the screen. She had a few missed calls from her friends, no doubt checking in after the scene at the gala. She smiled to herself, knowing they would understand. She quickly tapped out a message to Michael, the old friend who had called her earlier. "Thanks for the call earlier. It meant a lot to me. I'm doing okay, really. Just taking some time to figure things out." She hit send and leaned back against the bench, letting her thoughts wander. For the first time, she felt like she was finally on the path she was meant to be on. No more living in someone else's shadow, no more sacrificing herself for someone else's gain. She was finally free. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the lake, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had walked through fire, and now she was stronger for it. The challenges she had faced had shaped her, but they no longer controlled her. She was done being someone else's story. She was going to write her own from here on out. The future was hers. She stood up from the bench and took one last look at the peaceful lake before walking back to her car. The path ahead wasn't clear, but that was okay. She wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. She was ready to take the first step forward, knowing that whatever came next, she would face it with strength and confidence. She was ready to move on. As she drove away from the park, the city skyline looming in the distance, Emily felt a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement for what was to come. The past had shaped her, but it no longer had a hold on her. She was free, and that freedom was everything. The weeks following the gala passed in a blur for Emily. Each day felt like a new beginning, a fresh chapter she was finally ready to write. She had spent so long fighting for control over her life that now, with everything she had faced, she felt a quiet confidence she hadn't known before. Daniel was a distant memory, a shadow of the past that no longer haunted her. The truth had been revealed, and it had set her free. The first few days after the gala were a whirlwind of emotions, but with each passing day, Emily felt stronger. She had started picking up the pieces of her life, not just rebuilding but reshaping everything with a new sense of purpose. She had always been afraid of what came next, but now, she was taking steps forward without hesitation. One of the first things she did was reconnect with old friends, people she had lost touch with over the years. They welcomed her back with open arms, offering their support and reminding her that she was never truly alone. Michael, in particular, had become a steady presence in her life. Their conversations became a source of comfort as she navigated the changes. He was there when she needed someone to talk to, someone who understood the journey she was on. As the days turned into weeks, Emily also found herself pursuing things she had once pushed aside. She began to focus on her career, something she had put on the back burner for too long. It wasn't just about success, it was about doing something that made her feel fulfilled. She had always wanted to help others, to make a difference, and now, she had the opportunity to do that on her own terms. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the weight of the past threatened to resurface. But each time, Emily reminded herself that she was no longer that woman. She had grown, changed, and most importantly, she had learned to trust herself. There was a certain peace that came with accepting her own power. As time passed, she started to look at the world around her with new eyes. The city she had once seen as a place filled with pain and memories now felt full of possibilities. Every corner held a chance for something new, something exciting. Emily knew she had the strength to take on whatever life threw her way. Her past had shaped her, but it didn't define her. The woman she was becoming was someone strong, someone unafraid to take risks, to chase after what she wanted. There were still challenges ahead, of course, but Emily was ready for them. She had already faced her biggest fear, and she had come out the other side stronger than ever. The future was wide open, and Emily knew that she had the power to shape it however she wanted. She didn't need anyone's approval, and she didn't need anyone's permission. The only thing she needed was herself. She smiled, a quiet sense of pride swelling in her chest. She was finally living life on her own terms, and nothing was going to stop her. The best was yet to come. Emily woke up to the soft rays of morning sunlight streaming through her window. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt at peace. The world outside was busy, the sounds of the city waking up, but inside her apartment, it was calm, serene. She took a deep breath, letting the quiet embrace her. Life had changed, and for the first time, she wasn't fighting against the current. She was finally in control, steering herself in the direction she wanted to go. It had taken time, but the journey had been worth it. The last few months had been transformative. The person she had once been, the person who had been defined by her past, by Daniel, by everything that had held her back, was gone. That version of herself was a memory now. She had grown, found her own strength, and created a new path. A path that was all hers. Emily had taken steps toward her future with a quiet determination. She had started her own business, something she had always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue before. It was a small start, but it was hers. Every day, she worked hard, and each little achievement gave her more confidence. There were challenges, of course. There were moments when she questioned herself, when doubt crept in. But she had learned to recognize those moments, and push past them. She had learned that she was capable of more than she had ever realized. One evening, after a long day of meetings and emails, Emily found herself at the same park by the lake where she had spent time reflecting months ago. It was quiet now, the hustle and bustle of the city faded into the background. She sat on the same bench, looking out over the water, just like she had that night. But this time, there was no lingering doubt, no fear of what the future might hold. She was no longer looking for answers, she had already found them. The past had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. She had built a life on her own terms, and she was proud of what she had accomplished. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the water, Emily smiled to herself. It wasn't about having everything figured out, it was about moving forward, step by step, with purpose and confidence. She knew there would still be obstacles ahead, but she also knew she had the strength to face them. She was no longer afraid. The future was wide open, and it was hers to embrace. Emily stood up from the bench, taking one last look at the peaceful lake. She had walked through fire, faced the hardest parts of her past, and come out stronger. She was ready for whatever came next. With each step she took back toward her car, Emily felt a sense of gratitude. She was free. She was whole. And she was finally living the life she had always deserved.